the room we paid for twice. I caught the smell of her before I saw her, a trace of orange blossom on the stairwell that didn't belong to our building. It was the kind of scent you put on to be remembered, not to be comfortable. In the narrow echo of the concrete, I paused and listened for her heels. Nothing. The timer light flicked off above me, the darkness like a held breath. When I pushed open our apartment door, the scent was there too, faint but defiant in our hallway, on the scarf she draped over the chair, and on the hollow of the empty space where she should have been. I told myself this was what happens when you love a woman who knows how to stage a room. She leaves a trail that says she exists, in case you start worrying she doesn't. I'm not an easy man to fool. I make documentaries for a living, sound, not picture, and my work turns on tiny inconsistencies. The slip in a voice when a politician lies. The pause a gambler takes before saying the number that matters. It means I listen with my bones. And I had been listening to Lena for weeks now, to her stories that didn't line up and the way she closed her laptop with the care of a librarian, like the screen might complain if it could speak. She had another project, she said, a partnership for a startup that needed her marketing brightness. She had a new wardrobe that made my throat dry. She had lipstick the color of a ripe cherry eaten in the shadows before dinner. I set my bag down gently so it wouldn't knock anything out of place and walked into the kitchen. The white tiles reflected me two ways, in the glass of the oven door and the window over the sink, dusk painting the courtyard a tired purple. I pulled open a drawer and found it where I guessed she'd hide it, beneath the takeout menus, under the old stack of instruction manuals we never read. A clean hotel keycard in a paper sleeve with the crimson logo embossed. Valentina. The card had the warm plastic feel of a kiss that meant trouble. When she came in an hour later, Lena dropped her keys into the bowl and kissed the back of my neck with a casual tenderness so practiced it hurt. I turned around, leaning against the counter, holding the sleeve between two fingers like a magician showing a card. "You left this," I said. Her eyes flicked to it with a precision I'd always admired. No flinch, no guilt, calculation, and then a smile thrown like a scarf over the moment. "Oh, that. Kyla gave me a day pass to the spa. I told you, right? She had points to burn." "The spa is on the 7th floor, not the 4th, I said. "This is for a room." She didn't break. Maybe she got the wrong envelope. You could ask her. Kyla was her client, a woman who sold candles at a price that made me think of the electricity bill we were about to ignore. I didn't want to ask Kyla anything. I wanted to ask Lena to sit, to give me her phone, to put her wrists face up on the table like we were playing cards. But that was the kind of thing that turns love into a courtroom faster than you can explain your case. So instead, I slid the card back into the sleeve and set it on the counter between us, a polite boundary. "I booked us at the Valentina for Friday," I said. "If it's a spa pass, we might as well use it." Her mouth made the shape of surprise precisely as long as necessary. She stepped closer, the orange blossom rising like a confession. "Are you trying to be romantic, or is this an interrogation with robes?" "Can it be both?" I said. "And if it is, do you want me to stop?" Her hand found the back of my neck again, and that should have been the end of it for the night. We made dinner. We ate it in the softness we were good at manufacturing. We poured wine we couldn't afford. She sat in my lap, and we touched each other like people certain of the map. She turned around on me at one point and whispered, "Don't punish me with tenderness, Alex." I told her there was nothing to punish, that I was learning to love her like a last day. She smiled against my jaw and said, "Don't make me a ghost while I'm still warm." We went to the Valentina on Friday. It was the kind of hotel that velveted your footsteps and spoke in low register. The lobby was a museum of dim lamps. The elevator played the kind of music that seduces time. At the desk, I said my name and the receptionist smiled with the blank friendliness of good training. She slid a keycard across, and I felt a heat in my chest when I saw the number, 417, the same floor as the sleeve I'd found. Lena squeezed my hand and whispered, "See," which meant nothing and everything. On the fourth floor, she pressed the up button for a second elevator and said, "Let me change in the spa first." Her voice was light. "I want to wear the robe before I wear the robe." I went to the room alone and the hallway felt like a throat swallowing me. The card slid into the slot with a mechanical sigh. Inside, the room wore its expensive quiet carefully. I let the door murmur shut and set my bag on the bench. I checked the nightstand. 2 glasses. 1 coaster turned face down. A mint wrapper in the little garbage. Nothing that meant anything until I found it. A small folded receipt tucked in the minibar. 2 wines, 1 hour apart 2 nights earlier. You could make a lot out of very little if you were good at looking. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the city hum through the glass. I wanted to call someone. My brother who would tell me to leave a sinking ship. My mother who would ask if I've been sleeping. But I called Ilya, because once upon another life we'd been boys with clocks in our chests that kept the same time, and because he could look at me without flinching when I said the worst things. He was a lawyer, a good one, who thought the concept of truth was useful but not holy. "Meet me at the Valentina in 20, I said. "Bring that face you use on judges." "You dragged me into worse sets," he said. "Are you wearing a wire?" "Just a robe." He laughed a little, which used to be a small light in me. "I'm on my way." Lena returned to the room in the robe, cheeks softened by steam. She sat across from me on the low couch, tucked a leg under herself, and a lock of hair came loose in a way that made me want to forgive her for anything. She asked about my week, and I answered for a while as if the week had happened to both of us gently. Then I said, "Lena," and the name broke in my mouth like glass. She reached for my knee. "Are we going to do this here?" "Yes," I said, "because we're already here." "Then ask me better questions," she said, "if you want an answer." I thought of all the better questions I could ask. Instead, I asked the worst one. "Who is he?" She didn't move her hand from my knee. The orange blossom shifted. "You think that makes you safer, putting it in the third person." It was a good line, because it stalled me. The door knocked. Ilya leaned in like a warm mistake and took in the room before me. He shook my hand like I'd hired him and kissed Lena on the cheek like they were friends who remembered simplicity. "Ilya," I said, "thanks." "Any time you build a stage this nice," he said, sitting. "What's the play?" "We're revisiting an old contract," Lena said, crossing her ankles with perfect theater. If I didn't know better, I would have thought she loved him. Maybe I did know better and it didn't help. I told them what I'd found. Ilya listened with his hands together, the way he waits for a witness to oversay a detail. Lena watched me like she was trying to memorize the shape of my pain for later, and that was almost tender. When I finished, Ilya leaned back and looked at Lena. "Should I read my friend his rights?" he asked. "Or do you want to read him yours?" She smiled in a way that made me thirsty. "You'll be disappointed by the banality," she said to me, and then she told a story about Kyla that I almost believed. She named dates and invoices and the kind of scheduling notes that make infidelity sound so boring you feel stupid for expecting drama. She was good. She knew good. But I didn't believe her, and she saw that, and she didn't seem offended anymore. She seemed tired. "Okay," she said softly. "Do you want the version where you're right, or the version where you're wrong but we stay together?" "You're saying those are mutually exclusive." "I'm saying you won't forgive me if I did it," she said. "And you won't forgive yourself if I didn't. You've already rehearsed both." Ilya stood up. I'm going to smoke, he said, even though he quit 5 years ago. He left and the door closed behind him like an eye. Lena came to sit beside me. The robe slid open a fraction, histrionic to the exact degree that sells a scene. She took my hand and pressed it against the robe over her heart. Her skin was warm. Her heartbeat was steady. If I wanted to leave, she said, I wouldn't make you find a clue. I'd pack a suitcase and write you a list of what you need to cancel. I would hug you like a brother and tell you I meant every good thing I said. That's how I leave. But I'm here. And if you wanted to stay while making me an understudy, I asked, what would that look like? Like this, she said, except you'd enjoy the robe more. I put my forehead to her temple. We breathed together. It would have been so easy to let the night finish us. That's the worst part about desire when trust is dirty. It keeps its teeth clean. There was a knock again. Ilya slid in without waiting, his tie slightly undone. He looked like a man who'd stared at himself in a hallway mirror and decided to tell the truth. Alex, he said, and my name in his mouth asked me to forgive him before he spoke. I didn't come here to be your lawyer. Lena straightened. The room cooled. I came because I'm part of it, he said. Because 2 months ago, after you told me you might propose to her, I had a night where I hated that I loved you. I loved you for 10 years in a way that never demanded anything back. Then I watched you with her, and it made me want to break the thing I wasn't allowed to want. My hands were fists before I knew it. Say it plainly. He lifted his chin. I slept with Lena twice. There's a better way to name it, but if you want the ugly here, it was ugly. It wasn't bored. It happened in a room with 2 glasses and a mint wrapper because I hate myself fancy. Lena stood. Her face was stripped of any technique. Ilya, she said, and she said his name the way I used to, as if it was an answer. You were supposed to let me tell him alone, she said, and there was no fury, only a collapsing elegance. You weren't going to, he said. He would have asked better questions and you would have given him better answers. You're both professionals. I had the feeling of stepping into traffic. I stood, too. The bed was behind my knees. Ilya did not move as if he were choosing a sentence length. Something in me wanted to swing to make a sound with my hands that would reorder the air. But the other part of me, the part that edits truth for radio, raised a palm and quieted the room. Twice, I said, where and when? The first time was here, Lena said. The second time was my office. It was a Thursday. It was the kind of Thursday that felt like a dare. Did you love him? I asked her. Then to him, did you love her? Lena said, I love you. I had something with him that wasn't about him. That's the truth you'll hate most. Ilya said, I love you. What we had was a place to put it that didn't scare you yet. It would have been easier if they'd been cruel. I sat again. I felt underwater in a city that had sold all its air. It is unkind the way the body remembers timing, the distance between wine glasses, the exact weight of a keycard found under menus, the number of steps from a bed to a door. I pressed my fingers to my eyes until the world went white behind them. Why tell me now? I asked Ilya in this room. Because you already set the trap and still chose to hold her hand, he said. Because you invited me like a priest you want to hate. Because you don't want to be right, you want to be relieved. And because we deserve to be ugly in the same place where we pretended to be beautiful. Lena knelt in front of me, the robe held together with one fist. I can leave, she said softly, or I can stay quietly. If I stay, I will spend a very long time telling the truth so simply it sounds like a lullaby. I won't ask you to forgive me yet. I'll ask you to eat breakfast with me tomorrow and the next day. I'll ask you to not make a shrine to this room. I looked at Ilya, And you. He nodded as if answering an objection. I'll stop. I'll stop this way of loving you both. I'll be your friend if you want that poverty. If not, I'll be a voice 3 streets away. I won't ask you to absolve me. I stood and walked to the window, the city a tray of lights we couldn't afford. Their reflections stood beside mine, 3 silhouettes in expensive glass. It was a cinematic symmetry that made me angry. The soundtrack in the hallway bled under the door and then retreated. A car horn performed a confession, then changed its mind. My body remembered Lena before my brain did. She stood behind me, close enough to share heat without touching, the robe whispering when she breathed. Ilya stayed where he was, hands in his pockets, the shape of him painful in a familiar way. I tried on a dozen futures like suits I couldn't afford to wear out of the store. You paid for both, I said finally. The room, twice. Once with a card I didn't know about and once with a confession. I appreciate the symmetry, I hate the symmetry. I turned to them. Here, the script I'm choosing for tonight, nobody performs the ending. We're not good enough actors and the lighting is wrong. We're going to use the robe for its intended purpose and sleep in separate corners of the bed like strangers filming a commercial. In the morning, we're going to eat eggs. We're going to decide where our hands go. But not now. If you touch me now, I'll turn this room into a headline. Lena nodded like a verdict she'd asked for. Ilya nodded like a sentence he'd earned. We did as I said. It was obscene, how intimate a bed can be when nothing happens in it. I lay with my back to her and Lena didn't make a sound. Once, in the dark, she exhaled a laugh that wasn't a laugh. I almost reached back for her finger. I didn't. I heard Ilya in the chair by the window, his breathing a metronome calibrating a future where we were not this. At dawn, the city yawned like a cat. I went to the bathroom to splash my face and found a post-it on the mirror that hadn't been there the night before. Lena's handwriting, clean and optimistic. Breakfast at 8 if you want. A heart drawn so neatly it looked like she'd used a ruler. At 8:03, we sat at the hotel restaurant under a blush-colored chandelier that pretended it was sunrise. Ilya stirred his coffee as if it needed legal counsel. Lena picked at croissants like she was afraid of breaking any more shapes. I'll give you one piece of information and then ask for nothing, I said. Because God help me, evidence matters even inside love. The second time in your office, your neighbor sent me a voice memo because the music was too loud. She thought you were hosting a client and wanted to complain. I didn't listen. I deleted it. I believed you before I didn't. Lena's mouth trembled, the first imperfection. Do you want me to get her to resend it? She asked, voice small. Do you want to confirm your pain the way you confirm audio levels? I want to know if I'll feel better when I can play it back, I said. I don't think I will. Ilya put his spoon down. Then don't, he said. Let me do one decent thing. Don't turn us into proof. Leave us a story that maybe ends better in your head. We finished without grace. In the hallway upstairs, Lena touched my wrist with care. Come to the room, she asked. Not for an answer, for 5 minutes without an audience. We left Ilya in the corridor and went inside. The bed looked like we'd never been in it, which is one of the ways beds lie. She closed the door and leaned against it with her eyes closed, a woman who had stayed up all night in me. When she opened them, I was already walking toward her. We didn't kiss. I held her face in my palms and she held my wrists. It was a scene so restrained it felt indecent. I will not beg you, she said. Not because I'm proud, but because you deserve someone who doesn't need to. I'll tell you a thing instead. When I was with him, I talked about you like the sky you check before you go out. That is not an excuse. It is a weather report. You are the weather I live under. I let go. I stepped back. The robe fell a little and then settled. The smell of orange blossom rose again, and I realized it was ruined for me in every way but one. It would always make me think of a hotel room where I decided what kind of man I was when love stopped being easy. "I'm checking out," I said. "Not from us, from the room we paid for twice." I left the keycard on the desk like a confession and walked into the hallway, where Ilya stood with his hands behind his back like an altar boy. We walked to the elevator in silence. When the doors opened, he looked at me, and the thing in his eyes was apology, yes, and also the old fierce care that had made us brothers in the first place. "I'll wait for you," he said, voice low. "Not like that, like a friend who can afford to be poor." "I don't know how to be your friend for a while," I said, "but I remember how." We reached the lobby and the day met us without interest. Outside, the air was clean with the kind of morning that forgives last night's decisions. I stepped into it and felt the cold cut my lungs wide. I wanted to run. I wanted to go home and take the orange scarf and wash it and hang it in the kitchen and let it drip clean into a bowl we never used. On the street, a young couple laughed too loudly at something that must have felt like the end of the world. It made me smile despite myself. I turned back to the revolving door and looked at the elevator bank where I knew she would descend. I didn't know yet what we'd do with all the days beyond breakfast. But I knew two things. I was still the man who listened with his bones, and I was going to listen to her without writing the transcript in advance. I put my hands in my pockets and waited for the light to change. The city opened its throat. Somewhere above me, in a room made for both lies and their consequences, a housekeeper flipped our pillows and found the one thing we left behind: a mint wrapper folded carefully like a flag over the soft country of a bed we chose not to conquer. I breathed out. I stepped forward. And for once, I didn't ask the sound to prove anything.